Okay, so tonight I'm very pleased to welcome from Uncommon, Sascha and Kirsten here to talk to everyone tonight about how to support your autistic young person to going to university. My name's Kathy and I run Autistic Girls Network, and we're hosting this tonight with Uncommon. Sascha and Kirsten have done workshops with us before. I'm going to just leave them to it, basically, and I will let them introduce themselves and also introduce Sydney and Zach, who they've got helping them here this evening. Handing over to you guys.
Hello, it's really nice to meet you all. I'm Sascha. I'm one of the co-founders of Uncommon. This is Kirsten, who is also one of the co-founders as well. We are very, very excited to be talking to you today about how to support your young person in the transition to university, which I know is a lot of people's minds at the moment. I'm going to introduce you very quickly to Zach. Can you give us a wave? This is Zach. So Zach is one of our uncommoners who is a student and is here to answer questions for you and to contribute to what we're going to be talking to tonight. And Sydney, if you could give us a wave as well. That's Sydney. Sydney is also one of our brilliant uncommoners and is here to answer questions from all of you. Kirsten, do you want to start?
Absolutely. So Uncommon is a platform that supports young people through university. Sascha and I founded Uncommon because we are both neurodivergent. I'm autistic, Sascha has ADHD, and we both had sort of slightly atypical or non-traditional routes through university. I had a planned gap year, started university, had some things go pretty well in the first year, but academically not so well. And then had a very supportive university who decided to take a year out as we got.
Yes, please.
If you've just joined the room, if you want to go on mute, that would be amazing. So we know that for many people, the transition to university is both incredibly exciting and incredibly daunting. And I think, especially for people for whom maybe systems aren't sort of traditionally kind of set up for, which is why we founded Uncommon, to kind of both help the transition into university and then also help support young people whilst they're there. We work very much in complement to the support systems that exist within universities. We work in partnership within universities and a range of teams across universities. So the access teams, disability teams, wellbeing teams, with the aim of effectively providing support that wraps around those and enables young people to also meet a range of peers like them and to actually go through this transition with others who are experiencing similar challenges and exciting opportunities at the same time. So really glad to be here with you this evening. We're going to go through a medium-sized presentation, I would call it. We don't want to overwhelm, but we'll make sure there's lots of time for kind of Q&A at the end. What we'll be going over is some research that we did with over 1,000 young people who are either in university currently or have been so relatively recently. And we effectively asked them about what worries they had at various stages, what things they would have liked to have known before they'd gone, and then sort of what they had learned from that experience and what advice they'd like to pass on to others. So that's what we're going to be going through today. We'll also be talking a bit about Disabled Students Allowance, as well as the other support you can get from universities and how to access that, and then the support that we can offer as well. I think hold questions to the end where possible, I think, and we'll just give lots of time for Q&A. And so I think with that, we shall get going. Yeah.
If you have questions as you're going along, feel free to type them in chat and we'll, as a record, and we can line them up to be answered.
Line them up, and if they come up naturally in conversation, we'll try and add those in as we go.
Just if you're on group view, it's probably best to switch, I think, to active speaker view so that you can see the share screen that Kirsten's going to be doing.
Fantastic. So I'm Kirsten, this is Sascha, you've already been introduced to us, and we're joined by Zach and Sydney today, who are part of the Uncommon team. So Uncommon has been co-designed with research from over 1,000 young people, and specifically in partnership with 12 current and soon-to-be university students who have shared with us their experiences and then really helped shape literally every single part of what we do. Now, initially when we started designing the Uncommon platform, our focus was very much on mental health, because if you are neurodiverse, you are 6 times more likely to experience mental health challenges. And one of the challenges of going to university is that the support systems that you had before you go don't necessarily continue on with you. So if you move physically, you'll move NHS providers if you had mental health support. And also, obviously, you are potentially leaving home, friends and family. And we'll talk a bit about how we can kind of smooth that transition, but it does mean that you're in a new space and really trying to deal with things often on your own or with less support than you've been used to. And all of these can contribute to those mental health challenges. For autistic students, you're also 3 to 10 times more likely to drop out of university. And I realise that's not a very happy stat to come into, but I think what we have learned through our research and through the research that exists out there is that it is very much possible to provide support that significantly reduces the likelihood of this happening. The main reasons for dropout are often mental health reasons, and these are all things that can be supported either through university supports or the support that we provide. So we're very much here with the good news. There's lots of things that you can do, and we'll go through a lot of that today. So the support that is designed for neurodivergent people really needs to achieve 3 things, and these are things that we do within our platform and also that are provided to varying degrees by different parts of the university system. So neurodivergent people, like most of us really, need strong social support networks that can help support them day to day and give them a sense of belonging. They also need opportunities to pursue your interests and strengths, and I think that's actually something that university can provide in spades, with a whole range of kind of societies and lots of opportunities for people to try out new things as well. And then crucially, autistic and neurodivergent people need the tools to help stay emotionally and physically healthy. And I think this is a space where there has traditionally been a gap, which is a gap that we step into as Uncommon. But it's also a gap where you as parents can provide support along the way, and we'll talk a bit about how. So on the Uncommon platform, we help neurodivergent young people connect with each other. So it's a social platform. People join the platform, they can get to know each other. They can join a whole range of events and chat channels. So we've got in the middle Dr. Ian, who's one of our psychiatrists. And in the bottom right, we've got an interview that Sydney led with Dr. Mia, who's a psychologist on our team. And so we provide both pre-recorded content that can help guide people through things like making new friends at university or addressing social anxiety, as well as chances for people to engage directly with experts and also with students who've been through this experience and have great advice in terms of tips and tricks for how you can kind of make it through that transition. So it's all about putting people in with a group of peers and supporting those young people in ways that help them solve problems. So I said we'd talk a little bit about what young people are thinking about in the transition to university. And we have spoken to about 150 young people and done research with about 1,000 in total. So this is a good range of voices. And the sort of 3 things that we found in terms of why this transition is difficult, and this may ring true, is first of all, I mean, most people have a varied tolerance for uncertainty. Sometimes we love new things, it can be great, but often they can be difficult. So if you have particularly low uncertainty tolerance, which is quite common if you're autistic or neurodivergent, then transitions can be difficult. Our minds sort of start whizzing and worrying about all the potential things that might happen. We build up all sorts of scenarios in our head. It can be incredibly stressful, but there are ways in which to help manage this uncertainty that we talk through. Secondly, there's this whole world of new relationships out there. And again, we'll sort of talk this through, but I think for young people who've perhaps especially experienced quite a difficult high school time, be it that they have had difficulties finding friendships or the right friendships or friendships that suit them, moving to a new environment and being faced with the idea of trying to form new friendships is incredibly difficult. And even if you've had a great group of friends, it's a whole kind of new scenario. Maybe you've had a strong same friendship group for 3, 5, 8 years, which means, you know, starting again is daunting. So again, that's something that we support with a lot, and we'll talk through here. Finally, transitions can be hard because of negative cognition patterns, which effectively means a tendency to think towards the negative side of things. And this can be something which can either be due to a kind of natural autistic tendency to kind of sort of think in black and white, to sort of to look at a situation and think, oh, that's good or bad, or things are right or wrong, or it can kind of built up over time, especially if you face a lot of difficult and stressful situations. But again, there are ways in which we can use both mental health management techniques and self-management techniques to help with this. So, what are soon-to-be students thinking about? So a lot of things, a whole load of words on here. And I think the thing that came across most clearly in the research that we did is that this transition is very broad ranging. It's not just about university, it's not just about study, but it's also about moving house. It's also about having to set budgets. It's about having to remember to eat. It's about having to think about how you negotiate relationships when you're living in a space, not with your family that you've lived with for 18 years of your life, but with entirely new people, and how you manage those kind of relationships on a day-to-day basis, which is really, really new. So it's really, really broad ranging. And so we wanted to kind of think about what can you do before you get there? So we asked people what they would have found, what they would have liked to have more information about before they got there. And I think number one, as you'll see on this graph, is people would have liked to have learned more about the disability or study support they could have received, as well as how they could have a buddy or mentor to settle them in, and also how they could pursue their particular special interests. So this is something where you can begin to think about how you can support your young person. First of all is about getting out there and doing some research about the disability and study support that there is available. DSA is a big part of that, but there's also support provided by different parts of universities. So some universities will have access and outreach teams who may already have been in touch. They may have early welcome days where we're going to a pre-welcome day in a day or two's time to talk to a particular cohort of students entering university. And it's likely the case that you won't have to wait until you potentially get a package of Disabled Students Allowance support, but actually there's a range of support on offer before that comes into play. So we'll talk a bit in a moment about applying for Disabled Students Allowance, but I think it's important to be aware that there are other supports around this that are available. And it's not just from the formal teams, so the disability teams or the wellness teams or the access teams, but there's also a lot of study support available from tutors and teachers in the form of things like office hours and stuff, which and maybe a different format from school, where that is not always possible. But it's good to know that these things are out there. People also said they really wanted to find out more about pursuing their special interests. So I have some very strange special interests. It was totally not possible for me to pursue at school. But the fabulous thing about university is all of a sudden you're surrounded by literally thousands of people with literally every single interest under the sun. And you can get out there and discover new special interests and pursue things differently. So one of the things that you can think about, and young people can think about before they go, is actually looking at student union websites, looking at the societies that exist there. A lot of them have, be it Discord communities or Facebook communities, and you can actually get out there and join these communities straight away and begin chatting with people. So even before you get there, you can begin to have some sort of connection that is actually in line with things that you're really passionate about. And that's a great way just to kind of get chatting a bit and also feel a bit grounded. It also means when it comes to things like Freshers' Fair, which could in theory be overwhelming, you've got a bit of an anchor point if you want to go along and say hi to that particular society. You've got a sense of who people are. And there's traditionally a kind of one to 2 hour slot at the beginning of Freshers' Fair that is kept quiet, so that's super helpful. And we know of some universities that also have like pre-meetup, where you can go and meet people before Freshers' Fair, so you're not going along to these things on your own, which is also super helpful. So there's lots of ways of kind of starting this process of thinking about all the like exciting, fun things, fun connections you can make at university, even before you get there, so that you're definitely not starting from scratch on day one.
Kirsten,
yeah.
I wonder if it might be worth bringing Zach and Sydney in at this point to see if there's anything that they would have found helpful when they were starting university. Zach or Sydney, are you able to come on to speaker?
Yeah. I don't know. I think finding out about societies and stuff beforehand was definitely really useful for me. And I think Kirsten kind of covered a lot of stuff that I found really helpful. So yeah, I think things like Facebook groups for particular interests. I know my uni has the Medieval Combat Society, and for me that was something that I thought was really interesting, and I sort of found out about that beforehand. And then when, to be fair, I didn't go to Freshers' Fair my first year because it was during COVID, but in second year, when I did get to go to Freshers' Fair, I could sort of see all those things and I could speak to people and figure out what I wanted to do, but I already had that bit of information and feel comfortable. So yeah, I think a lot of what I found really helpful has already been covered.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think a lot of this stuff is stuff that I was thinking, the stuff that is down on this graph. So with knowing more about my accommodation, I definitely wish I would have known a lot more about my halls, because I got in through clearing. I didn't have the chance to pick an accommodation. I was kind of just really last minute told, like, you're going to be in this accommodation, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't really given much of a choice in that because I got in through clearing. And I also really wish that I had looked a lot more into societies, again, because I started uni during COVID. I didn't really bother looking into it that much because I knew there wasn't going to be any in-person stuff going on. And so I just wasn't that interested, but I think I would have probably met a lot more people had I looked more into that, even though it was online. So yeah, quite similar, a lot of stuff that's already been covered. But.
Thank you.
So the next thing we asked is what would have helped you in your first 4 weeks of university. And rather than me rambling on for ages, Sydney and Zach, it'd be good to kind of know if these things resonate with you and what would have been your top pick out of these.
I think knowing how to advocate for my needs definitely would have been the number one. Oh, can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, good. I feel like I definitely didn't initially realize that that was an issue. But as I went through the first month or two, or, you know, even first year, I didn't really know how to advocate for my needs. And I feel like had I had support with knowing that, I think that would have really helped. So I definitely think this resonates with me.
Sydney, what would be your top pick?
I think probably help in managing new home and roommates, and just not really being prepared for like moving in with total strangers and stuff like that. It was a bit daunting.
Are there any sort of things that you would recommend to people kind of thinking about that first 4 weeks?
I really think it links to knowing how to advocate for your needs, because if your housemates are, say, really messy or really loud, and you don't know how to vocalize that to them, that can cause just issues for yourself and like really built up like feelings towards your housemates that you're not expressing, that can cause tension. So bit of both with those ones.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because I think it's such a new experience, and also difficult to know where the boundaries are, right? Because, you know, up until that point, you've been living most likely with your family, who you've kind of developed a way of being over 18 years. But I think, I mean, these are all things that, again, you can provide a lot of support around as parents. I mean, I think it's sometimes difficult to know exactly what the challenges are when you're feeling really unsure in a new situation. And Sydney, as you're saying, when some of those tensions kind of start to build up. But as a parent supporting a young person going into university, you know, if you are kind of sensing a tension around something, then it's a space where you can try and help your young person unpack that a bit and explore some different ways in which they could articulate their needs and sort of start to talk that through with the people involved. And sometimes it's just really simple things. I think one of the topics that came up was around knowing when to ask and how to kind of share things in fridges, which is theoretically simple, but actually kind of fraught with a whole load of sort of unwritten social rules. But, you know, if it's something you can solve really quickly and easily, then it can avoid a lot of tension. I think the other thing is obviously around navigating social situations and kind of making friends. And we'll touch on this a little bit, but a lot of people in the research sort of talked about how it's obviously difficult to know up front when you meet someone whether they're going to be a sort of best friend for life, or whether they're going to fall into this sort of circle of acquaintances. And I think it's sort of tempting to feel, or you hope, that you will obviously meet those sort of best friends and the ones that are going to be your kind of stalwart people for university within those first few weeks. And that may happen, but it may not happen. And so a lot of people, when responding to our research, sort of talked about how it's super helpful to kind of have to be able to talk with someone, a parent, a friend, about the friends that you're making as you make them, and to sort of talk through how you feel about that person in terms of, you know, are they an acquaintance? Are they a friend for certain settings and not for others? Or what kind of support do you think that person naturally provides to you? And how much time should you focus in on that relationship versus maybe saying, well, I think they're probably more of an acquaintance than a long-term friend, or a kind of an in-depth friendship. So actually, I'm going to continue to kind of build out that friendship network and kind of keep on trying things out until I sort of find those strong fits. Then finally, we asked people what it was most important to get right in their first term. And I think this is where some of the kind of really kind of bigger, longer term issues begin to come out. So right up top came managing stress and mental health. And the one sort of universal thing that came out from then some research that we did around challenges that people experienced at the end of the first term was that almost everyone had started to experience stress, worries that they were falling behind with their studies, and also often challenges around sleep. And for some, that can tip very quickly into mental health challenges, especially if you've got a past history of that. For others, it can be the beginning of a potential tipping point, or it can be something that you can manage before it gets to that point. But these are things that we will be providing support on at Uncommon as we go along. Early on, around topics around how to sort of manage sleep and diet and kind of getting into new routines, and then also around social anxiety, which is a big issue for a lot of young people. And then sort of as terms evolve, we will evolve our kind of support as those trends change. And for some, the challenges may become more in depth, at which point we'll provide support for more specialist challenges. So for instance, maintaining sleep routines or difficulties with insomnia and sleep, as well as more specialist support around things like social anxiety.
Kirsten, would you be right for me? Be happy for me to do this bit? Is that yes? All right, okay. Hello everyone. So we asked our all of the people that we surveyed what they would have liked more help with when they started. And just as a reminder, all of these people that we spoke to are people who are either existing students or were students in the past, so they're looking back retrospectively. Kirsten, would you mind moving on to the next slide? So the types of things that they wanted, they would have liked more help with when they started, was knowing that they were neurodivergent. I think there's often a big debate around whether to get a diagnosis or not, and that having a diagnosis can access support, and some people feeling that there's a stigma around it. But really the strong feedback came that knowing and having that kind of identity was helpful to people. Understanding how to live alone, which Kirsten's touched on quite a lot, and navigating social things, so situations and that they will find themselves in. Often the people that we spoke to talked about sensory challenges in finding study spaces and so on, and advocating, as Kirsten's talked about, came up just sort of again and again. Some practical things that people were talking about were maps of campus layouts. So in terms of having a map to be able to find your way around, some universities provide it, some don't. So that's something that really practically that you could do, for example, via something like Google Earth, to help your young person sort of find their way around or encourage them to do it. And then a lot of feedback came back in terms of financial and organisational management and support as well, in terms of just understanding how to pay bills and budget and run bank accounts and various different things. We asked them, if we moved on to the next slide, what advice they would give to new neurodivergent students. And this kind of split into 3 different categories. The first was be kind to yourself. And I know this is something that is often typically quite difficult for people who are neurodivergent, but being aware of burnout, giving yourself time off at the weekends, which is guilt-free, being open to withdrawing from courses that they're not doing so well in, unlearning perfectionist habits, and considering taking time out. And I think this is all stuff that this perfectionist element is something that's really strong with people who are autistic and who are ADHD. And actually understanding how to manage your energy, understanding when you need time out is really important. And this is what people were saying they wish they had done better. So they wish that they had given themselves the permission to not do classes that they weren't doing so well in, or to take time at the weekend when they needed it. The next sort of category that came up was around getting support from others. So this was kind of practical support around joining study groups and mentoring hours. Something that came up very, very frequently, and again, I don't know if this was the case for you, Zach and Sydney, but there's sometimes I think a reluctance to ask questions or to say when you don't understand something. And people were telling us they really, really wish that they'd done that more, that they understood that asking a question isn't going to make you look stupid. That's what everybody is there for. Certainly agreeing house rules and finding supportive friends, and then also finding specifically finding mental health support that understands ADHD and autism. I know many of you will have been through CAMS and may feel that you have or haven't had that, but people, again, looking back, were saying that they really would have liked to have had that mental health support. And then the third category that people talked about was using neurodivergent friendly tools and systems. So a lot of lamination came up quite a lot. So using plans and using lists, thinking about visual timers, getting notes and books beforehand. And then again, coming up quite a few times was wishing that they'd had access to an ADH coach to help sort of set up systems, particularly for people who are ADHD, but obviously executive functioning in both ADHD and autism is something that people can struggle with. And so supporting, kind of helping out those, set up those systems would have been useful to people. Zach and Sydney, is there any bits of advice that you would give to people, to new students starting, beyond any of this?
Something that I would add, I think it relates back to the first slide, particularly of this like 3 things, is your professors don't expect you to do all of the reading and all of the extra stuff and be like totally on top of things all the time. And like, say there's like your favorite module, you might want to pick that one to go and do the extra reading for, but like your least favorite module, you really just have to pass, and you shouldn't be like beating yourself up and thinking you're not doing enough because you're sort of like, you know what the bare minimum is for that one module to get through it, because it can be like really daunting having like all 4 modules and all of this extra reading and stuff that you feel like you have to do that you might not realize in first term you don't actually need to do, and it won't be on the exam. So that's definitely something that took me a while to learn.
Thanks, Sydney. Zach, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was going to say I completely agree. I think sort of rationing your time is something that you really need to learn, especially if you're someone that has sort of a lot of stuff you need to do besides uni. For me, I write for a living. Outside of uni, I do part-time writing for blogs and stuff. Since I need to have some time set aside to do those kind of things, to do like a part-time job or anything like that, I think rationing your time and figuring out, these are the modules that I can do best in, these are the modules that I can do easily, these are the modules that I can do with a lot more work, and figuring out what do I actually need to do and what is unnecessary. For me, there are a few modules in first year and a few second year modules where I was just like, I really don't enjoy this. I find this really hard to focus on. I'm just gonna ration enough time so that I can learn the material decently, but I'm not gonna go over the top like I would for some modules. And I think learning that and learning that it's okay to not do 100% in every module, that's quite important. But then on top of that, I think the not understanding being okay, that's a really important thing. And I know it's already been mentioned, but I thought I'd add, one of my professors in second year basically said, like, if you're confused, that's good. Like, if you don't understand something, that's good. Because if you go through everything and coast through, you might not be learning. So if you're confused, that just means you're learning, and you should ask questions, email people. Don't be afraid to put your hand up and say, I don't understand, or I got a different answer. Can you explain why? Like, that's super important. And I think those bits are really important.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Zach. That's thanks, Zach and Sydney. Kirsten, did you want to do the bit on tools and strategies?
Absolutely.
Just quickly.
We've touched a bit on some of the things that you can do as parents to help ease the stress of transition. We're going to go through kind of 3 key strategies here. So the first is, it's relatively simple, really. It's just understanding what your young person might be worried about and when. I think Sasha and I would both hold up our hands and kind of say that there were some definite surprises for us in terms of what people found stressful and when. University life has changed since we may have gone, or you may not have gone, and sort of being able to kind of know, and here's this is basically a diagram of what people said they were finding difficult at different points in time. Having that information is really helpful, and this is something that we can kind of share with you, and you can have in mind as your young person is going through this transition. The research that we've done for the moment covers the first term. We'll repeat this research when we go into just before we go into spring term as well. So be mindful, and just ask some questions about some of these things in a very non-specific, relaxed way. But these are things that you can obviously sort of explore a little bit and see how people are doing as they go. And then maybe just uncover something that the young person may not have even quite clocked that is stressing them, but when asked, it might sort of just tip over that awareness, and then you can have a good chat through. So next thing then is you can really help young people build their confidence and self-esteem. So confidence is inextricably linked to self-esteem, so how we perceive ourselves. And especially if you've come from a situation where maybe you've had a difficult time, or even if you haven't, maybe you're just kind of going into a new space, people's self-esteem can be low or fragile, and this is something that you can help build positively. So it's very possible to help build both our self-esteem and build our confidence. People feel much more positive if you listen and validate to what they're saying. Again, this may seem like a sort of quite obvious thing to say, but I think sometimes when people talk about the situations they're in, sometimes we reflect back our own feelings or impressions of that. Actually sort of listening, validating, sort of reassuring the young person that what they're thinking and feeling is entirely valid, it's their experience, is a way of reassuring people that their lived experience is valued and real. And you can then think about building positive cycles of self-esteem by helping people work through those challenges. So if your young person is bringing up a challenge, validating to them, reflecting back to them the fact that you hear, you understand them, it is a real challenge for them, and then helping them work through that. And even if it's not something that can be solved, finding tiny steps that they can take that then helps them take a step forward, feel a little bit more confident about it, come back to it, think again, take another small step, can all help with kind of building that self-esteem, their belief in themselves that they can do this, and their confidence overall. So these may be small steps, but sort of being there along the way and just keeping on doing that kind of through these sort of transitions, be it building up the courage to ask someone to not leave dirty plates on the side because you're really smell sensitive, or having the confidence to sort of knock on someone's door and say hello because you would quite like to maybe see if this person is going to be your friend. These are all kind of small things that we can help build confidence in. The other thing you can do is model positive self-esteem yourself. And this is something that we all sometimes do accidentally, when we sometimes use sort of negative self-talk in front of the people around us. We criticize ourselves sometimes verbally, but sort of trying to avoid that, trying to voice positive thoughts about yourself, voice positive thoughts about other family members and how they're doing, can really just help build this feeling that things are possible, and that people can feel confident themselves and can do well. Then the third tool that we've done in previous workshops that can be really useful and help people prepare to leave home and make this transition is building out a support network map, and also kind of preparing this support network. So this is a kind of simple diagram that you can draw with your young person, and it basically looks at all the people that support them, And then you can think about how the kinds of support that these people provide. So if I look at this diagram, maybe my friend Jasmine is a great person at giving practical support. So they're a person who provides practical advice, whereas maybe Mason is the person that I go to when things just haven't quite gone round. I just need someone to listen to and reassure me. Similarly, there may be significant adults in your life that maybe your young person isn't in contact with on a very regular basis, but they may actually be people who are very reassuring to them and who could provide great support during that transition. So mapping out this network, thinking about who provides what kind of support and sort of talking this through with your young person, and then making a little plan in terms of how to effectively activate this support network. And I realize it sounds a bit formal, but it can be as simple as basically either your young person or you reaching out and just talking a bit about the transitions that's going to happen and articulating a bit about how you value that person's support and the support that you might like from them as you go through that transition. And what that then means is that person is aware they're there, and also that you and your young person feel confident, much more confident in terms of reaching out. And I think that's particularly important if there are people who you may want to reach out for support at times when you don't feel confident, because the last thing you instinctively want to do is necessarily strike up contact with someone when you feel vulnerable, but this helps you kind of get that support network in place ahead of time. So types of people in your network, name them on the branches, and then categorize them as emotional, practical, informational, social, and try and get a mixture of those categories of support so that you know where you can go to for those different kinds of support when you need them. And if you're having difficulties kind of thinking that through, or you want a kind of sort of simple exercise you can go through and kind of label this, and here's a set of 12 questions that you can talk through with your young person, and try and put names against a range of these, and then maybe message a few people on the list and sort of get that support network in place. Sydney or Zach, are there any sort of top tips that you would have in terms of thinking about your support network before you leave for university? Any things that you guys did?
Unmuting would help. I think definitely, like, if you're really concerned about being able to make new friendships and stuff when you go to uni, I'd say, like, voice that to your current secondary school friends and tell them, like, oh, it's really important that we keep in contact, like during Freshers Week and when we both move away to different universities, because, like, I think I might need to, like, FaceTime you sometimes and talk about how it's going, and you know that that person's still going to be there for that support, and just like making sure that they know that, and that they're, like, obviously if they're your friends now, they're probably willing to do that, and they probably want to keep that contact as well because they probably have similar concerns. So having that conversation is probably quite a good idea with some of those people you're going to be moving away from, that you know you might have just lived down the road from them your whole life, and now you're going to be like cities apart. So I think that's something that would be quite useful.
It's a really good one. Zach, are there sort of any tips that you would have?
To be perfectly honest, I didn't have much of a support structure in place when I came to uni. I wasn't that close with any of my friends from secondary school. And one thing I do wish that I'd done was just, as Sydney said, get in touch with some friends that you have from your secondary school, from your hometown, whatever. Any existing support network, try and carry that over as much as you can. Because I didn't, and I regretted it in first year, especially with the circumstances of lockdown happening. I struggled to make friends, and then I was wishing that I had those friendships and I hadn't, just not gotten in touch. So I think definitely going to uni, I would get in touch with some friends, make sure you have someone to check in with once in a while. or someone to hang out with when you're back home, that kind of thing. Because that was something I didn't have, and I think that would have been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I think particularly if some of your friends from home are a bit more like outgoing and extroverted than you, it's not that they don't want to keep in touch with you, it's just that they're more likely to be like a little bit more busy than you, or be initiating plans with more people, and it's easy for them to just for it to slip their mind. So just reminding them and like knowing that like they're still thinking about you, and like that you want to get in touch with them and stuff. They won't not want to do that. It might just not be something that they prioritize because they're a bit more extroverted. Like keeping that in mind.
Are there any sort of contacts with other bits of family, other teachers or professionals or other adults in your life that you either kept or sort of have always thought, oh, I would quite like to sort of keep that relationship going? Oh, very quiet. Maybe a no. I think we've also had some people comment about be it sort of people who've been involved with activities, be it orchestras or clubs or things they've done, and they've sort of kept in touch with adults involved there, as well as sometimes sort of family, friends who may not necessarily feature in day-to-day life, but have actually been a really good source of advice that people have stayed in touch with.
Yeah, no, that's actually, it took me a minute to think about that one, but there definitely are adults that, like, might say my gymnastics coaches that have literally known me since I was like 6 years old until I left for uni, and I haven't really kept in contact with them at all, which I definitely wish that I had a little bit better. So yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think I'm going to hand over to to Sascha and Kathy and Sydney and Zach. I know a lot of people are very interested in Disabled Students Allowance and accommodations. So we're going to go through both parents' point of view in terms of application and also students' point of view as well.
Thanks, Kirsten. So yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about the DSA and different accommodations that you can ask for from university. Kathy has been through, Kathy, you've been through the process yourself, haven't you, in terms of applying for DSA?
Yes, I have.
Brilliant. Would you be able to give any advice to the group in terms of, well, in terms of what the process looks like and anything that is worth looking out for that kind of caused you problems or
Sure. I mean, first of all, I think probably the best thing to say about DSA is that it's far and away the easiest kind of benefit that you can apply for. It's far easier. So if you're dreading it and you're thinking of, oh, the nightmare that the DLA form was to fill in, or the PIP form, or applying for any HCP or any of that, it's much easier than that. And it's almost like the opposite process. You feel like when you were doing one of those other applications, you feel like people were, or rather the powers that be were just waiting to say no to you and to make you jump through as many hoops as you possibly could, and it was going to be an enormous fight. DSA is not like that. It's like the opposite thing. Basically, you provide some form of proof that what you're saying is true. So it might be a diagnosis, it might be well, it probably will be a diagnosis, but it doesn't have to be, because it's not diagnosis led, it's need led. Might be if your child has an EHCP, it might be a copy of the EHCP, it might be their medical records, whatever it is, you need to prove what you're saying. So if you're applying because your young person is autistic, but they also have other medical issues, then you would need to provide kind of proof of both. So basically you apply for it at the same time as you apply for student finance. Do it as early as possible, because it does take a little while. But you apply for it as early as it can. It's part of student finance. It's in the same application bit. And then basically you get allocated but actually I suppose it might have changed because I did it 2 years ago, but we got allocated a local assessor, although it wasn't face to face, it could have been at the time. I think this was pre-pandemic, but I'm not sure. And you have an assessment, but this is not a scary DLA or PIP assessment. This is an assessment where the assessor has your information, has your proof in front of them, and basically said, okay, so what do you think are your biggest needs and how can we accommodate them? And it's like totally opposite to all the other applications for benefits that you will have had. So that's the really good thing about it. I would say some things are pretty standard. So if your young person is autistic, it's quite likely, if they don't have a laptop, it's quite likely that they would be able to get one. You do have to pay the first £200 towards it. And if you want to upgrade from the one that they want to give you, then you have to pay the difference. It's quite likely that you might get speech to text software, for example. It's quite likely that you would have some kind of mentoring depending on your needs. I believe that the most that you can get is 3 hours a week, but when you think about it, 3 hours a week is quite a lot. So you might not want 3 hours a week straight away. And it would be divided between academic kind of mentoring, like support mentoring for academic stuff, and everyday life kind of mentoring. And if you needed mental health mentoring, that would be a separate thing, and that would be the 3rd hour. I have to say that mentoring can be quite varied, and the kind of mentoring that you get is going to be different depending on where you are. Some universities will provide that from the university and they'll have staff at the university. Some universities will have a completely different outside agency doing the mentoring, and therefore it will all be online, and it won't necessarily be very related to what you're doing, and they won't necessarily know very much about your university or your circumstances. So I think probably that can be a little bit variable. The other thing to say about the mentoring is, and maybe this is variable too, but certainly a problem that my son had, is that it wasn't timetabled. So it wasn't in the same slot every week like lectures were. And therefore this became problematic for him because his executive function was one of his biggest issues. And unfortunately, he kind of ended up having to organise the mentoring sessions, and that didn't work out for him at all. So I would say try and get them to do it at the same time every week if that's possible, and it should be possible. There's no reason it shouldn't be possible. I'm trying to think whether I've missed things out. I'm sure I have. There's certainly other possibilities about accommodations. There's all kinds of things in terms of if your child needs to have a studio flat, for example, because they have to, there's some medical reason they need to live on their own, then theoretically you can have the difference paid between, sorry, let me turn my phone off. You can have the difference paid between a regular accommodation and the studio flat, and DSA would pay that. You can also have transport paid in certain circumstances. So for example, if your young person would have a lot of difficulty getting public transport, some occasions taxis are paid for. That's not regular, and that would need more probably negotiation, but it is possible. And there are plenty of other accommodations that can be made by the university themselves. But one thing that really, really has struck me in the last 2 years, and I probably should say that my son has just dropped out of university, so I'm probably not the best advert for this tonight, but there are other reasons why. There are medical reasons why he dropped out. For him, it became fairly obvious in this last year, and bearing in mind, I'm sure Zach and Sydney would agree that this has probably been the worst 2 years ever to be a university student, because of the pandemic, obviously. It has become very obvious that the university themselves were doing very little to support him. and it was because he needed to be proactive, or I needed to be proactive and get the university support team involved. And unfortunately, it's not the case that, you know, obviously you send them all the details, you tell them that you're autistic, you tell them that you have support needs, but unless you actually go and get involved with it, and get kind of registered for support and get it on their radar, they won't make sure you're okay. So that's why kind of being able to advocate is really, really important, I would say. I'm going to shut up now and let Sydney and Zach come in.
Thanks, Kathy. That's so helpful. That's really brilliant. Sydney, I know that you applied for DSA and get sort of quite a lot of support from them, don't you? And am I right in thinking that the coach that you've had has been quite useful for you?
Yeah, I have. So another thing about the mentoring support, they give you a certain amount of hours weekly for the year, but they don't actually need to be. So there could be 1 week where you feel you need 3 hours of support and another week where you feel you need no support. And you can change. So the thing about it not being set times weekly can be frustrating, but when it comes to a time like exam period and you want more support than you did at the beginning of term, you can then roll over those hours that you didn't use at the beginning of term and say, I'm super stressed right now. I don't know where to start with my revision. I need all my specialist skills in this 2 months and all of my mentoring support in this 2 months, because this is the time where I'm stressed and where I need the support. So I think there is like it'll depend for different people. Personally, I take a lot more of my mentoring support during exam periods rather than at the beginning of the term and like just after exam periods, say. So that works quite well for me. But obviously some people do want it to be very regular and weekly. So that's just one sort of like counterpoint to I think someone said about it being a problem, them not having a set time weekly for their mentoring.
That's great. Yeah. And Sydney, the process of applying for DSA, would you agree with Kathy that it was a relatively did you find it got quite an easy process and that you felt?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. I don't have any experience applying to any other benefits to compare it to, but it was relatively simple. It's all just on the student finance website where you would apply for your general tuition loans and stuff like that.
Sydney,
I'd been diagnosed.
In comparison, Sydney, my daughter's PIP application, I had to send 300 pages of evidence.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So a lot easier than that. Yeah.
It's a lot easier than that. Can I just answer a question that I've seen come up?
Yeah.
Which is, I think I might have confused people because I mentioned EHCPs. Sorry to confuse you. Absolutely, yes. You don't take an EHCP with you to university. Mad as it seems, definitely seems mad to me. Student Needs Jungle are actually campaigning with the government to make EHCPs carry on to university, but who knows if or when that will happen. But what I meant was, when I said that you show your EHCP as proof, is that you can show that your EHCP plan to the DSA assessor, and that kind of shows them what the support needs are. Sorry, I'll jump out again now.
That's fine. Thanks, Kathy. Thank you for clearing that up. Zach, now I know you get a bit of support from the DSA, but you get sort of support outside that as well in sort of terms of general accommodations. Could you talk a little bit about how you access those and how that's been for you?
Yeah, so most of my accommodations are run through the uni, and Kathy was saying about if someone has a need for living in a studio flat, and they can prove that need, they get a discount. And you were saying theoretically, well, I am the case of that. I have really severe sensory issues to do with foods, especially like smells and even sometimes sounds of like cooking and stuff really bother me, to the point where I couldn't share a kitchen. And it specifically said that on my diagnosis, so I could prove it. But the DSA weren't able to help with that, but they could pass on that information to my university. And then I did have to get in touch with the university separately and say, look, these are my needs. This is where I'm staying. can you help? And then they've, for the past 2 years, they've helped a lot. I was initially in a standard studio, and they covered the difference between a standard room and a standard studio. And then last year I was in a large studio, and I was expecting, you know, I upgraded, so I thought, oh, I'll have to pay the difference. But I don't know if just to preface this, I don't know if this was intentional or what, but they paid the difference between a standard room and a large studio, which I really wasn't expecting. So that was sort of a really, really useful thing for me. And it definitely, the thing I was most worried about when it came to uni was sensory stuff. So having that cleared up and sorted early on was brilliant, and was like the key thing for me. And so I'd really recommend, if your young person needs anything like that, that may be something that's a little unorthodox for the DSA, I'd recommend talking to the university and seeing what they can do. And someone just put in chat another reasonable, it was Kathy, sorry. Another reasonable adjustment would be for someone to stay in halls if needed. And yeah, that's definitely true. I'm doing that, and that's something that they definitely offer. So there's all kinds of things that you may not hear examples of. So if there's something that would really help, a lot of the time, especially in the DSA, I found that the assessors seem to really want to help me and give me anything I need. So I'd really recommend talking to them about options, talking to university support teams, and any other support groups you might have access to. I think making sure it's the advocating for the needs thing. It's so important, and making sure you know sort of where you go to for different types of support is really helpful.
Yeah, on that point about the assessor really wanting to help, I mean, I wasn't diagnosed until after my first year at uni, so all through secondary school I'd never had any support. I didn't know what the options were, what sorts of things would work well for me, and I found my assessor was really good at like laying out like, these are what we have, take a look through it, I'll explain it to you. Do you reapply every year? You can reapply and you can get another needs assessment. Sorry, I just saw something in chat. But also if your needs haven't changed, you don't need to reapply.
Brilliant.
Yeah, but yeah, so they were super helpful in just like helping me identify what things I might think that I needed and what they could help me with and what the options were to support me. Most of the support that I do get is from the DSA and not my uni, apart from any exam adjustments and stuff like that. So there's things like changing deadlines if they fall all in the same week, extending coursework deadlines. There's also like a dyslexia sticker that I can put on top of all of my written coursework, that there's like different marking rules for students with dyslexia, that I assume they'll take less marks off my work for grammar mistakes and stuff like that. So that those are more like the more practical exam grade related things are things that the uni helps me with, and then anything more mental health related, study skills, practicality stuff is more the DSA.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sydney. Thank you, Zach. That's really helpful. So it's 9:05, so we're going to come to the end of our presentation bit and open it just for any questions that people have. Just to sort of draw this bit to a close, the point that has come back in a lot of the research that Kirsten and I have done and has kind of been echoed by Kathy and Zach and Sydney is that there is support available, obviously through the DSA, but actually the one thing that does happen at university is that there is lots of different types of support in lots of different places, and it can be really hard to kind of coordinate and navigate your way through that. And that is partially what we want to do at Uncommon, is to help people to understand who they should be talking to, what support they can get, which departments they should be they should be going through stuff through with. And that is one of the aims of Uncommon. And so the Uncommon platform is opening this week. We are in a Discord community, which is a kind of gaming community. It's super simple to join. We're going to pop a link in chat now, which is our website, and then where you can encourage your young person to sign up for Uncommon. It's completely free at the moment, and the reason that it's free is because we're running it as a pilot program, which means that we're opening up free in return for people's feedback. So our ambition for the program is that we will have an all singing, all dancing community of thousands and thousands of neurodivergent students across the country, across the world, who are all supporting each other, being proud of their neurodiversity, being proud of the strengths that that brings, but also feeling comfortable and safe enough to be able to talk about the challenges and the obstacles that they may be facing. So if your young person decides to come onto the platform as of tomorrow, what they will see is a group of people who are already on there, who are willing to give advice and help. Zach and Sydney are two of those people, two of our Uncommon guides. So they'll be on the platform answering questions for young people in the same way that they have been doing tonight. There's going to be video content and some blogs in terms of different tips and tricks that people can be doing, and sort of we have blogs on tomorrow that you can look at tomorrow, where it's around if you are autistic, these are some of the challenges, and these are typical things that if you're ADHD you'll face at university. We've got content from some of our student guides in how to, for example, pack and prepare for university, what you should be taking, what's the grossest thing you've ever found in a student kitchen. There's been quite a few, so we've got like some content on that. We also have video interviews with psychologists and psychiatrists giving practical help on things like how to manage friendships and how to look through how to work with social anxiety. So the platform at the moment is it's a pilot, as I said, but you are all welcome to encourage your young people to come onto it. We just ask for feedback. This is absolutely the heart of what we're doing, is about co-creating, which is what co-creation means, is about devising it with the people that we're creating this for. And we have this amazing group of 10 neurodivergent students, of which Sascha and Sydney are a massive part of, that have been helping us to develop the project. So there's a few questions that are coming up as we are talking. So I'm not sure if the link has gone into the chat, Meccan. I wonder whether you would be able to pop it into the chat for the pilot program. But just to say, this is a community that's exclusively for students. So parents at the moment, it's not a product for parents. This is about finding support for your young people, because this is about finding independence and help with each other. It is possible at some point that we might launch something for parents as well, but we'll keep you posted on that. But at the moment, this is something that is exclusively for young people. We have the focus of the platform is on this year's intake. So someone else has asked a question on that. So it's about people who are transitioning from school to university, but we also do have other people in the platform who are students who are, for example, postgrad students or doing PhDs, and so it is a community, and there are people who are kind of more experienced students giving advice to people who are transitioning into university. But I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions, and just as a reminder for the questions, sometimes if you type a question into the chat, it automatically defaults to replying to the person who's just typed in the question. So it just makes sure that the questions that you're asking, you're typing into all contacts, as opposed to the person who's just replied. So let's just run through some of these and see what questions we have. So Michelle has asked, is there a lot of labelling re-autism on the site, or is it the neurodivergent terminology primarily used? My daughter rebels against anything labelled as relating to autism specifically. Yeah, okay, Kirsten, did you want to respond to that?
So I'd say we've got a lot of people who relate to neurodiversity in quite different ways. So no, it's not just it's not specifically using the label autism a lot of the time. Effectively, what we've done is transdiagnostic, which is simply a term to kind of say that what we do is we look at the traits and experiences that we as neurodivergent people experience, both in terms of challenges and strengths, and then those are the things that we talk about. So we'll talk about, say, for instance, social anxiety in the way that we experience it as neurodivergent people, and that might be social anxiety because we have sensory challenges, it might be because we have auditory processing, it might be because we've had difficulty because we've felt quite other and haven't belonged, and so we've built up social anxiety. But those are all things that are common across a whole range of neurodiversities, and we talk about that sort of a kind of cross diagnoses. And so yeah, we touch on things that span a lot of different neurodivergencies.
I think it's safe to say that the focus mainly at the moment is on young people who are autistic or have ADHD, but you can absolutely come onto the programme, onto the platform if you don't want to, if you're not labelled as anything. That's why we're called Uncommon, because it's for people who just feel uncommon. So yeah.
And I also think that there's just such an overlap of traits between autism and ADHD that so many people who are just diagnosed with ADHD or just diagnosed with autism have a lot of like overlapping traits between the both of them, and stuff like that. So
yeah. There's also kind of traits that I think a lot of people really only sort of begin to understand as they sort of exit high school and enter kind of the space where you're having to do a lot of stuff for yourself. I know for me, kind of executive functioning is not really something that I ever thought about at school, because it was just so structured that I just did stuff, and I'm very kind of autistic focused structure. But then it's an entirely different world when that also involves paying bills or having to plan complex tasks involving friendships and arranging things and turning up on time. So yeah, I think people tend to often learn new stuff about themselves. So even if maybe your learning difference is, say, dyslexia, it may be that you experience other things that you kind of learn about on Uncommon that you can then kind of learn tips and tricks for as well.
Got a question here about whether the website is exclusively through Discord at the moment, or whether there's a separate website as well. It is through Discord at the moment, and the reason we've put it on Discord is that Discord is a really good community platform. Zach is one of our Discord experts, and there are also on Discord a number of other communities that lots and lots of students are already part of, so it kind of makes easier for us to sort of connect with other communities as well. At some point we may move away from it, but at the moment the plan is to stay on Discord. We've also had, in terms of the students that we're working with at the moment, some of the students who've never been on Discord before, and they found it pretty easy to access. Sydney, had you used it before?
No, so I'd very rarely use Discord, and only in like a one-on-one sort of thing with certain people to talk to. But actually so many of the societies in my university, their community is mainly on Discord, and I'd never used that before. And so they might actually find once they get to university that they started using Discord just to communicate with Uncommon, but actually to be able to communicate with those societies and stuff, it is definitely something that is used a lot, and they'll find like good to know how to use and stuff. And it's really user friendly as well. Like it's not hard to understand what's going on in a Discord community.
Brilliant. We've had a question from Emma who says, is this just for this year's intake? My daughter's due to start. No, you're welcome to join earlier. That's fine. A lot of the content is going to be around the intake for this year, but it's absolutely welcome. In fact, we have a couple of people on already who are in the same position. So your daughter would be able to meet people of a similar age. So yeah.
I think kind of come springtime as well. So we are talking with a range of FE colleges, for instance, who are obviously preparing young people for further education or higher education. So we'll be building out our programme of support and kind of extending it back for that year in the lead up to uni, so you can kind of start asking all those questions ahead of time and start thinking about these things and just get all the reassurance that you need, just to make this a really kind of hopefully fun positive transition.
So I think, were there any other questions that people wanted to chat in, or anything that we've missed out that people would like us to be able to, any questions we've missed out that people would like us to be able to address? If you wanted to type them into the chat, we're happy to answer them now. I think Kirsten has put the proper link in, which I missed out, which goes straight through to the pilot platform. So the pilot program. So you just need to email details, and we will email you tomorrow with details of how your young person can join. So Meccan has asked, can current students join the program? Yes, they can. And in fact, we would love to have current students on the platform as well, because they're the people that are going to be helping to give advice, and this will grow. This is, at the moment, the focus is on the transition, but it's going to grow very, very quickly to be supporting students in other years and other points in the year as well. So brilliant.
And the content, I mean, I think especially content around mental health, around managing relationships, all of these things will help people at all stages. I've got a couple of questions. Last one coming in: is university mentoring online or face-to-face? It depends on the setting. I think many people now do it.
So my DSA provided mentoring. I had the option to say whether I wanted it face-to-face or online. I chose online because that's what I prefer. It's easier for me. Don't need to travel. But yeah, they were totally happy for me to do face-to-face as well.
Yeah. And in terms of as parents, if we do share some of our content through social media, through our Facebook group and also on Instagram. So do follow us along and we'll kind of share what we're doing on the platform. And I'm sure if we get a lot of interest, we can always kind of share more of what we're doing in the platform. We just want to make sure that the community itself is students talking to students, and that there's this, you know, ability to kind of feel that you're just in a safe space where you kind of know who's around you and can just talk about anything and everything. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I think we're at the end of most of the questions now. Thank you very much for all the feedback that's coming through. That's really nice to know. Sydney and Zach, I'm going to put you slightly on the spot now. I'm going to say, if you could give like one bit of advice to parents in terms of supporting their young people at this really important transition, what would you say? Would either of you be happy to answer that? You don't have to, if that's too much of putting you on the spot. Oh, I was too mean. That was too mean of me.
No,
oh.
I just need a minute to think about it. I'd say, yeah, listen to their concerns, reassure them that it actually isn't as awful as you think it's going to be. I was totally terrified to go into halls the first day, and it was actually fine. So just, you know, like, it's actually not going to be as scary as they think it's going to be. Just reassuring them of that, but also not being too like dismissive of, oh, it's going to be fine, blah blah, and, you know, listening to their concerns and thinking logically with them about how you can ease some of their anxieties going into university, and making a very logical map of sort of how you're going to deal with certain things and what might come up. But yeah, it won't be that bad. You definitely think it's worse than it's going to be.
You know, that genuinely, that has come back time and time again from the students that we've spoken to and we've interviewed, is that it is not as bad as people think it's going to be. So there's a bit of reassurance that we've spoken to over 1,000 students, and that was a really big bit of feedback that came back, that it is okay. So there's something you can reassure your young people with. Zach, is there anything you wanted to add to any of that, or are you?
Yeah, there was one piece of advice that I don't think has been covered, it was something that I did with my mum when I was starting out, which was take your young person to the place they'll be living if you can. I'm currently at Nottingham, and I went there, I think 2 or 3 times beforehand, and one time I explored the campus, one time I had an interview, so I got to know some of my professors, I got to wander around a bit and see that kind of thing, but I also had to figure out things like shopping, and it was really helpful. We went into the town I was living in, or that I was going to be living in, and we explored a bit, figured out where I'd be doing my shopping, where I could go for all the essentials, and just generally got a feel for the place I was going to be living, and that was really, really helpful. And for me, because sensory issues were a big part of my worries, and for me also, like, just worries about the accommodation and the place I was living, being able to get the foods that I like, all those things were bugging me. So doing that a few weeks, maybe even a couple months beforehand, was so helpful. So if you can, I'd really recommend doing that, because that was like the most helpful thing, probably the most helpful, yeah, but that was a big piece of advice that I felt like I should give.
Oh, that's brilliant, Zach. So good. That's a really helpful bit of advice.
Can I give a bit of advice as well?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I would say try and have an arrangement with your young person whereby they answer their bloody phone because I can't tell you how many text messages or voicemail messages are left unanswered by my son, but maybe that's just him, I don't know. But also have, depending on how difficult it is for your young person to know that they're getting in over their head, or to admit that they're getting in over their head, or to communicate that, have some way that they can communicate that with you, even if they can't say, look, I'm really, really struggling, which they won't all be able to. Have an alternative way to communicate that, so that you can jump in if necessary. And not that I'm saying that you should always jump in, but if it becomes obvious that things are getting too much, about it, because it's very difficult when they might be 200 miles away and they're not actually communicating that things are going very badly. So I would say just talk about it beforehand and have some kind of system, if that's possible, just to alert you to that fact, so that if need be, you can try and get them some support.
Was there any examples of the system that you used, or you were aware of other parents have used?
Oh no, I'm totally talking, talking out of my own experience. I didn't do that, and there's probably a reason I didn't do that, because communication is just absolutely not a strong point of my son. So I'm talking from from that having happened, and for not wanting it, trying to head it off at the pass, if you like, and stop that happening.
Oh, that's a really good thing to know. Thanks, Kathy. Thank you. Kirsten, sorry I interrupted you.
No, I think I was doing my usual butting in thing. Yeah, I was just going to say, one of my teachers in sixth form kind of said to me, like, don't worry, when you go to university you'll find other people like you. And I think, at the time that seemed like a relatively sort of blasé, annoying thing that an adult said to me, and I didn't really believe her. And who knows, if you say the same thing to your young person, whether they'll believe you or not. But she was absolutely right, and that doesn't necessarily mean other neurodiverse people. It could be other people that just have an insanely kind of intense interest that you've never found someone else that's had that same interest, or just a way of thinking or a way of doing things. And it's just an amazing opportunity to be kind of in a much wider pool of people, and to be able to kind of find people that you develop friendships with. I think, I didn't particularly have close friends. I think Zach's talked about that a little bit, and it was daunting, this idea of going somewhere new, because I was worried that the same thing would happen again, that I'd end up sort of also not without any kind of support network. But it's totally possible to move on. And also, there are so many different spaces within the university. It's not just about those first few weeks. Fingers crossed those go amazingly and you meet some fab people, but there's always an opportunity to join a new or different society, or to meet someone of that class that you take the next term. So it's a sort of endless world of opportunity as well. So hopefully that's a super exciting thing to look forward to. And yeah.
Thank you, Kirsten. Well, I'm going to finish by close up now by saying, you want to say something? You were waving.
I'm in a bit of an unusual position, because I became a student again recently, and found that my uni offered me nothing as a person on the autistic spectrum, and I think I should have fought harder for that. And I think, to any parents, in order to get your child's support, start early and keep pushing, and don't accept no for an answer. And then the other thing I'd sort of say, in terms of uni at the end, because my course was very condensed, so I started and finished in a very short space of time. Prepare for the end too. The end will come at some point, and that is a huge thing to be going through. You need to prepare for the end as much as you prepare for the beginning. So induction is not an event. Induction is a process that happens over a length of time, and you need to sort of, you know, think about the end as well, about, you know, leaving accommodation, leaving friends, going to a new place, work, maybe more study. I mean, there's loads of it, and it happens very quickly. And of course, you know, before that, you've got major exams and stuff. So you really need to be in your third year planning for the end, or whatever is your last year. That's it.
So always have the end in sight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to just draw this to a close and say thank you so much to everybody, and leave you just with one final note, is that we've talked a lot about university tonight, and how to kind of manage that transition and how you can support your young person. University doesn't work out for everybody, and I just want to give you a little bit of it's not right for everybody. And I never went to university. I didn't even make it, and I've had a really, really fun career and done lots and lots of good stuff. And so all the students we've talked to, and all of the brilliant neurodivergent that we've spoken to, who have become entrepreneurs, who've done really well in businesses, so many of them have had non-traditional routes through university, in terms of having years out, or repeating, or not going at all. So just to say that I am an example of one of those people. Kirsten is an example of one of those people, and that the university is brilliant for people, and we at Uncommon want to do our absolute best to kind of make that transition and make university as brilliant an experience as it should be for everybody. But if it doesn't happen, there are other options available, and that, you know, at some point we may look at those as well. But anyway, I just wanted to end on that and say massive thank you to everybody for coming today. You can also join our mailing list on our website. So as parents, you can sign up to that on the website. And apologies for the binging that you heard earlier that was coming through on my screen. That was all of you signing up for our pilot programs. Every time you heard a bing, that was another one of you giving us your email address. So thank you. Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming, everybody, and we hope to see your young people on the platform this week. Thank you. Cool.